Okay, kia ora everyone, and welcome to today's Fulbright New Zealand Good Works Alumni Seminar for March 2022. Our guest today is Leslie Carroll Roberts. Leslie was a Fulbright US awardee to New Zealand at Gateway Antarctica at the University of Canterbury in 2002. She's one of the founders of the ECOPOESIS project, a philosophy of building creative conversations around climate change through shared meals, shared readings, and craft projects. ECOPOESIS is inspired by the spirit of historic community making, such as quilting bees and knitting circles and exquisite corpse drawings. Leslie is an essayist, a journalist, and an author, and she's written 2 books on ecologies. The first one's called The Entire Earth and Sky, Views on Antarctica, and the second one is called Here is Where We Walk, Episodes from a Life in the Forest. Her work is featured in multiple publications, and her reportage is also featured in places like The Believer, The Sunday Morning Herald, Forbes, The Bellingham Review, and many, many others. We're really, really pleased to have Leslie with us today, and so please say a warm welcome to Leslie Carroll Roberts.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Therese. That was beautiful. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy to be back in New Zealand, even if it's virtually for now. So I'm going to be giving a little talk about the ECOPOESIS project. I'm going to shift over and share my screen so that you can look at the deck. I will be both talking directly to you, and I'll be doing a little bit of reading from a chapter that's coming out in a book that Professor Elspeth Tilley has edited out of Massey University, being published out of Cambridge in the UK. It's called Creative Activism. So I'm going to be reading a little bit from that as well. And I'm very grateful to Elspeth for including the ECOPOESIS in that project. So here we go. Let me see if I can, sorry. One would think after 2 years of doing this that it would all be just so seamless, and yet it is not at times. Stand by. Okay. Let me do this. I'll go up to slideshow. And can we all see that? Yes? Okay, hold on. Let me escape it and go to the top and start at the beginning. That's not what I want. Sorry, wrong one. There we go. All right, slideshow. Here we go. Thank you. So I wanted to begin by thanking Fulbright New Zealand for inviting me to speak as part of Good Works. We'll be talking today about this project I founded with 2 of my colleagues. It's called ECOPOESIS. And so the title of my talk is Thoughts on Building a Climate Change Collective Based on Conversation and Craft. So again, I just want to thank Fulbright New Zealand for hosting this as part of their Good Work series, and also to thank Professor Elspeth Tilley, as I mentioned earlier, of Massey University for including our chapter on ECOPOESIS in the upcoming anthology, Creative Activism. It's been a delight to work with Elspeth, and I look forward to hanging out with her later this year when I'm in New Zealand. I'm dedicating this talk today to my dead boyfriend, Frank Arthur Worsley, who is one of your Kiwi countrymen and who was a big part of my research when I was a Fulbright Fellow at Gateway Antarctica in Christchurch. And one of the things that Frank taught me from afar was this spirit of planning, never giving up, and always finding a way to have active hope, even in the most dire situations. So Frank has very much inspired a lot of my thought and philosophy around climate change, this idea of active hope. As we know, they just found the Endurance, what is left of the Endurance in the Weddell Sea. The reason they found the Endurance is because of Frank. He had very accurately noted where the wreck would land because he understood so much about that sea and the currents and what have you. And as you know, he was the person who saved everyone's lives. And I just always like to give him the credit that he deserves, our man from Makarala. So with that, let's talk about ECOPOESIS. So in 2022, we are gathering again together in person. We're excited for this. We're going to have one of our workshops here in San Francisco. As I said, when I come to New Zealand, I'll be on sabbatical leave. I'm hoping to run some ECOPOESIS workshops there as well. And I look forward to connecting with anybody who's on this call who might want to partner with me on that. Our theme this year is repairing time, image, language, and environment. Climate change is actively forcing humans to rethink time. And we're looking at deep time and short-term time at the same time. One of our thought leaders is Ursula K. Le Guin, who is a Bay Area native, as you know. She says, you cannot buy the revolution, you cannot make the revolution, you can only be the revolution. It is in your spirit or it is nowhere. So with those wise words, we'll move ahead here. So who is the ECOPOESIS Project? Well, right now, we're three. Myself, Adam Marcus, who's an architect, who teaches with me at California College of the Arts, and Christopher Falliers, who's also an architect and is my colleague at CCA as well. And here's what we do. So we've built this multi-year project that creates community and connectivity and craft to better communicate climate change towards design solutions and cohesive action. And so we raise a lot of questions, and some of them are fairly, day-to-day types of things like, what does it mean to recycle? Why do we do that? How much can we curtail the creation of new apparel? How can Indigenous knowledge, how can we learn from Indigenous knowledge and practice some of the methodologies that our forebears practiced and that we have forgotten or pushed aside. And then with that, I just want to read a little bit about the ECOPOESIS Project. And this is from the chapter that is in the book Creative Activism. The ECOPOESIS Project proposes a corrective vision towards a myopia that impacts our collective ecological awareness. The ECOPOESIS Project assembles people and materials to better see what it means to all live together in a heating world. And by all, we mean all: the tuna fish, the Monterey cypress, the lupine, the Homo sapien, the penguin, the kitten, and on and on. The ECOPOESIS Project explores integrated making practices, teaching, speaking, convening, writing, and other forms of communication towards a hope of seeing more clearly unimagined terrains, including unexpected ice-covered volcanoes. And those of you in New Zealand will know that what I'm referencing there, and I actually discuss it in my book about the Antarctic, the Entire Earth and Sky, views on Antarctica, as well as in this chapter, which is the Air New Zealand flight that crashed in the Antarctic in 1979. And the ability to see or not see what's in front of us is a very crucial sort of existential aspect of what we're encountering here with climate change, right? So in 2019, pre-pandemic, we had our first workshop. It was in San Francisco. About 45 people or so attended. These are images from that day. It was a very joyous and beautiful day altogether. We had artists, designers, writers, architects, industry people, government people, who all came together to think about how we can make solutions together. And we also believe in a good meal. So I wanted to show some of the food that we made by hand. So how do we work? So we're an interdisciplinary team, and we believe very much in looking across disciplines, not getting siloed into like the humanities or design or what have you, so that we can use varying approaches to solving towards climate. We like to invite old and new friends from varied disciplines to come together with us in these thinking and making exercises. And we also spend quite a bit of time looking at the signs and symbols of climate change that surround us. We're all quite familiar now, unfortunately, with the term greenwashing. And there are other symbols that we've all come to sort of digest and look at. And one of them is this one. So this is from the 1970s, and it was commissioned by a paper company in the US as a way to show how once paper was used, it could be recycled and more paper could be generated from the used paper. What we all know, living as we do in the 21st century, is that there are some pretty problematic aspects of this notion that it's a closed loop. And we know that from the Pacific vortex, from the microplastics, from walking on a beach in a remote place and finding plastic there. So this notion that we're all putting our plastics carefully into our recycling bins, and then somehow they're all in this closed loop, is part of the fake lore. And it's part of what we want to address as a project. So how do our workshops work? So we start with RE words, and we believe that by centering on specific words, we can get people sort of thinking collectively right out of the blocks, right? So in 2022, we're really excited. On April 9th, we're all going to be together again in a national park called the Presidio here in San Francisco. And this year, our site's going to feature a 12-foot dome, 12 foot in diameter, not height. It's 7 feet in height and 12 feet in diameter dome structure, which will serve as a vitrine for our work, not our world, misspelling, sorry. And we have about 45 people coming together, and our theme is repairing time. So let's look at these RE words for a second. These were the words that we pulled together in 2018 as we were thinking about what the actions are that we can take around climate change. We were thinking about refreshing, restoring, reacting. In 2019, we settled on retreat, remain, resist as positions people could take around climate. And so before we go further, we start looking at the actual work, I wanted to talk a little bit about our core values. So we're all about building community, and we deeply believe in cooperative discussions and craft making. As Therese mentioned in the introduction, part of our inspiration is looking at community craft projects like quilting bees, like barn raisings. Historically, how have humans come together to make things towards solving? And we also practice what we call critical hope. So it's not a Pollyanna hope, it's a hope is action. And we believe that if we can all get into active hope, we have a pretty good chance at building a better tomorrow. And we also believe everybody can do ECOPOESIS. It's not exclusive. It's not meant to be something that is, behind the walls of the ivory towers or in the academy or what have you. We see it at schools, community groups, within families, churches, nonprofits, businesses, and local government. And we also believe that we're very humble with this. We in no way think we're the first ones into this space. And we think we all are doing ECOPOESIS and have been doing it for some time. We just haven't necessarily named it and organized it. All this towards this larger existential moment that we're thinking about, which is that human perception of time scale is changing very rapidly now. I see this as a college professor. I'll talk about this later. I wanted to show you a couple of moments from 2019. So this is a group of artists, architects, students, editors, local government people. They are working on their particular project. They decided to paint, cut up their the base drawing we gave them, paint on it, and then weave it as they're talking about their theme. This is the final weaving that they made. This is in the courtyard at our school. After it was woven, they decided the best thing to do was to burn it. So we let them burn a little bit. We couldn't do too much because, California fires, etc. So let me talk a little bit about our history and our influences, just so you have a sense of sort of where we're calling from. So in 2018, I got together with Adam Marcus, who is a dear friend of mine, who's an architect who teaches at CCA and also does a lot of conceptual art projects as well. And we talked about what kind of contribution could we make in terms of building this community. We were then joined by another colleague of ours, Chris Falliers, who had shared an interest with this. And we launched this in 2019. And at that time, we were very much thinking about ideas of flat ontologies and human and more than human solidarity. And we wanted to focus on ecological philosophies that were increasingly sort of in the public mind. And it was fantastic. It was a wonderful event and wonderful keynote, and everybody was joyous. And we were getting ready to, we were gearing up for 2020, and then, we all know what happened next. So we decided that we didn't want to stop. We wanted to keep the conversation going. So how could we do that? So we created a global ecological collaboration, and I'll play a little bit of that for you in a second. So this year, 2022, we are back together again with the author, Jenny Odell, and I highly recommend her book, How to Do Nothing, which is just a genius read. I wanted to, because I'm speaking here in New Zealand today, I wanted to speak a little bit about some of our influences, and one of whom is a Kiwi, and this is Joseph Michael. And he did a really fascinating and very compelling project that caught our attention, where he was thinking about the Antarctic, which, as you know, I'm also an Antarctic humanities scholar. So obviously it caught my eye. Let's take a look. So this was in New York City. He coded and projected images onto the United Nations building, thinking about climate and the Antarctic and the future. And we're very interested in this idea of like how accessible it is, how it's not behind a paywall at a museum, how it's not in a class at a university. It's just you're walking down the street and you have this beautiful multilingual vision of what tomorrow may be bringing us. So that's your countryman, Joseph Michael. We also look at things like pocket guides for inspiration. As again, I like to just reiterate, we don't think we're alone in this, or that we're coming up with anything that hasn't been thought of before. We just feel as though we're bringing a certain type of organization to it that hopefully will allow more people to join in, because we all need to be doing ECOPOESIS all the time. So we look at how messaging around ecologies takes the form of a thing called a book. And how do we design and collaborate around things that aren't books? Maybe it's a blanket, a sculpture, or maybe it's coding, in order to continue the conversation about climate. So in 2019, one of our groups, you saw the early group that was doing the weaving. This is one of the other groups. This was curators and a fashion designer and designers and some local nonprofit people as well. And they decided to take their base drawing and cut into it. And their message was all of our, I think it's all of our actions mark this world. I should know that off the top of my head, but I don't. There you go. All our actions mark this world. And because they had a sensibility towards apparel and cloth, they actually made the drawing into this sort of tapestry type effect, which was quite beautiful in the studio. So that was one of the other projects that was made in 2019. I wanted to play just a wee bit of this for you. This is How We Hear Now. You can listen to it on YouTube. It's a call we put out on Earth Day in 2020 and also 2021, where we invited people to submit audio files to us talking about their ecology and their worldview. And we received files from all over the world. It was coded by a former student of ours who now lives in Berlin named Patrick Monte, and using processing. And then in the background, you see those squares, and they have a shimmery quality to them. And what they're tracking is seismic data in real time coming out of California. So let's see if we can listen to this a little bit. We will see if it's too slow. Oh no, here we go. Okay. It was loading rather slowly before. We'll see if it cooperates now. Here we go.
Is filled with his presence since he came to this earth. At the background, you can also hear Vice President Pence with Coronavirus Task Force daily briefing. This is our environment today.
Roughly 17 overlapping recordings of bird sound
Within the budget
throughout
every
the
day,
day.
you can always choose one second to connect with nature that we are very much a part of.
Middle Harbor Shoreline Park in Oakland, California. 2:00 p.m. on April 22.
Sorry, let me get back to my
Just past high tide on
my
San
deck.
Francisco. Gentle waves lap at the shore. Geese
Hold on.
frolic in the shallow water. Cranes and trucks in the adjacent the offloading cargo on each freighter.
Okay, that's not great.
Geometries and forms and materials
There we go.
in space register its layered histories and have humans continue to
Sorry.
the tidal wetland, the terminus of the first transcontinental railroad, a bustling naval munitions depot, and now once again, a
There we go.
restored wetland nestled in the middle of a commercial port.
This is a mix I did while I was working at the Library of Natural Sounds, the Oakland Museum, back in the day in the 1990s. And
Here we go.
made this with advice of biologist Paul Massner.
Let me see if I can get the other one to
the
stop though.
environment that is recorded here, the sound.
Okay, there we go. Isn't this fun? All right. And here we go. So there's our, yeah. So that's what we did in 2020 and 2021. And we launched it in San Francisco last summer in an abandoned space. It used to be a big housewares store. And we put up multiple screens and you could walk by and listen to it and see it. And every time you enter the project, it loops differently. So you never enter it twice in the same way. So you're always hearing different voices. And we wanted that weave. We wanted the overlapping sound of different voices because we were all living in isolation. We felt people craved this idea of the braid of human thought and ideas. So that's how we spent our time over the isolating years. So what are we doing in 2022? So Jenny Odell, as I mentioned, is our thought leader, and we're going to be making cyanotype prints, which is a solar-based printing method. Many of you probably have done this with kids or at schools. You basically have a treated paper and you put an object on it, and then the sun creates an image on that. We've did a test workshop with the students who are participating back in February. So this gives you an idea of what the cyanotypes look like. And what we're going to be doing is generating cyanotypes in the Presidio on April 9th. And then we're going to be taking them and printing them on fabric and making a tapestry that we suspend within the dome, the aforementioned dome. So we're excited about that. We're excited to think about how we recognize and see ecologies through this type of printmaking, which has a long history, particularly in ecological texts. And it's fascinating just to think about how that early photographic technology was specifically used to understand a lot about plants and plant recognition. So Jenny Odell quotes many people in her book, but one of them is the Trappist monk and activist Thomas Merton, who was an American who was a big anti-war activist during Vietnam. And he said something that she quoted, and we feel very near and dear to this, is the ECOPOESIS project. If I had no choice about the age in which I was to live, nevertheless, I have a choice about the attitude I take and the way and the extent of my participation. And participation is such a driver for us. It's such a fuel for us. And we we think a lot about different ways people participate when they come together. And we think a lot about how using certain technologies disengages us from ecologies, and how we can mount a response to that. So we believe in conversation, and we believe in performance, and we believe in bringing people together to think through, these various challenges that we're all facing, and together. And I think that's where I want to just pause here, and then I'll stop my share, and hopefully we can have a wee chat about this, and any questions you might have about how we work and what we're thinking about. Yeah, so thank you.
Thanks so much, Leslie, for the for sharing and for showing us some of the different projects, that some of the different things that are involved. I didn't have a question so much, more as just a comment that it's fascinating to see that enormous array of what people are doing. Across all these different mediums. You've got sound, and you've got textiles, and you've got this very sort of kind of malleable things, as well as words and so on. I mean, it's just in a way really representative of how many different kinds of conversations we can have about these issues. I mean, it just, like your point about recycling is another one. The fact that it's so easy to want to feel like a good citizen because I do all of my recycling, even though in the back of my head I know the reality, I know what really happens, but yeah, more than anything, I just think it's really inspiring, I guess is the word, to just sort of imagine all these people getting together across all of these disciplines and using their knowledge and their skills and resources to create something that is new and is other and is a kind of a I don't know, just to me it just feels incredibly generous,
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I mean, one of the things that we really want to, make sure everybody understands is we're not guilty of anything. We're not in trouble. We haven't done anything wrong or bad. We've been, most people are good people, and they have good intentions, and they want to do the right thing. And we think that by coming together as collectives, as a community, and as people who are ecologically minded, we can support each other the way historically people have. And, I just had the naturalist and author O.B. Kaufman over for a hike in the Presidio with my students. And one of the things he said that was just so genius was, he said, don't bet against humans. And I thought I love that. Like, that's the act of hope we're talking about. We can actively make change, and we don't have to feel like, oh, that means we don't get to, drive a car or go to the beach or whatever. I mean, we can imagine a world where our footprint is smaller and lighter, and it's still full of joy, Hi, Lou.
How are we going there? It was really good. I really enjoyed it. Can't wait till you come out to New Zealand.
I'll be there in September. I was telling Therese, I understand there's a room for me in Wanaka.
Yeah, no problem. No, the weather's gorgeous. No, that was a fascinating presentation. I never knew what it was.
Thank you. So many of you know Lou at least by reputation and by name. So Lou was the head of the Department of Conservation in New Zealand for many years. And Lou and I fell in together back when I was a Fulbright fellow, and he was the head of Antarctica, New Zealand, and also a neighbor of mine. And we both shared a love of popular music and general antics. And we've remained mates over the years. So yeah, so thank you for coming, Lou. It's so nice to see you.
Yeah, we'll have to do an ECOPOESIS party when you get here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, so I'm going to bring my dome. So I've got the dome, and I'm going to bring it, and we're going to set it up. And then maybe there will be a margarita machine involved with this as well. I don't know. But we would love to make some ecopoiesis with all of you. And there's Elsbeth. It's so good to see you, Elsbeth.
So good to see you too. Nobody's asking questions, so I thought I should jump in and ask one. I was trying to lurk. My cat came running in when the bird noises came on.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in the oral sculpture and the birds tweeting, and suddenly there was kitten. She's hopped down now. So yeah, thank you. I also learned heaps more, even as you said, having read about your work in the collection. I learned so much more about the breadth of it and the way that it's involving different participants from different realms and bringing together different ways of seeing a problem, including the creative and Indigenous knowledges, etc. It's such an important way forward. So you were talking about active hope, and my question is about the balance. So how on a daily basis in this work, or how in the work itself and the ways that the work proceeds, do you keep that balance between having to take action, which is partly acknowledging the grief of what we're losing to spur action, and keeping hope? So you've talked a little bit kind of conceptually about hope, but what do you do practically to keep doing this work and keep moving forward?
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's great. So I'm pretty involved with the fashion industry on a level. I teach in fashion at my college, and one of my colleagues, Linda Gross, is a global expert on so-called sustainability and writes very beautifully about this idea of what kind of the dream and the lie of apparel and this sort of thing. So one of the things I think a lot about is how do we all appreciate what we already have? I mean, it's kind of Buddhist in nature, right? But how do we look at what we already have and get away from the attention economy that is grabbing at us all the time and telling us that we need more, right? So, Silicon Valley has some very insidious aspects to it, as we all know, right? And one of them is that we should be trying to be happy all the time, which is a false front, right? And also that happiness can come through materiality, when we all know that happiness comes from connections with humans and the more than human world, right? So connecting to the earth on all these levels. I would be lying if I didn't say there were many days where I feel tremendous despair, because I look at these things all the time. And, I was just down in the desert, and I went over to the Salton Sea, where they're starting lithium mining and where they're replacing crops with solar farms. And that's upsetting to see, that we're taking over desert ecologies to generate so-called solar power. And what the end game is for all the more than humans who've been living in that desert successfully for a long time. So I mean, I think part of it is that the way I knock myself out of despair, Elspeth, is that I know that I cannot solve problems and think through things. And I have two sons, right? I have two children. So I can't solve for things if I'm in despair. The only way I can solve is if I stop and say, there are small things that can happen right now, and bigger things. But, for instance, like ECOPOESIS, I'm really excited to have these 45 people join us in the Presidio to make these cyanotypes. And I'm really excited to come to New Zealand, even though it means I'm gonna have to get on a plane and discharge all the carbon from that, but I'm gonna stay long enough that I think it's worth it. But yeah, so is that helpful?
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you here in New Zealand and doing some great more work together.
It'll be fun, yeah.
Kia ora. My name's Sarah, and I'm a health promoter who's just starting to move into the climate change space. So I guess I'm just wondering, what is your plan for when you're in New Zealand? Where will you be? Who will you be connecting with? Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you. That's so right now, I'm sort of ironing out the plan. I just got word the other day that they're starting in May, Americans can come into New Zealand. I wasn't sure when we were going to get the green light, but we have it in May. So it'll be sometime between May and August that I arrive there. And I am going to be pestering Elsbeth at Massey University. I think we're going to try to get up to some hijinks around performance studies and things of that nature. I'm hoping to connect with some people through the Department of Conservation. I'd like to take my dome out into the bush. I'd love to connect with some Maori elders to sit with people at a marae and think about the really important work that Maori thought leaders have been doing for a long time about so-called personhood with more than humans. So I'd like to learn from that. So I'm a South Island gal. I've spent most of my time in Littleton and Christchurch, and I'm in love with Hokitika and just everything about the South. But I'll probably end up dividing my time between the North and the South. Sarah, where are you located?
I'm in Christchurch. Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Community and public health in Christchurch. Yeah. So,
I'd love to connect. That would be great.
Yeah, that sounds good. How do we do that?
I think through Fulbright, but also I can put my email in the chat, and anybody who's here is welcome to email me. As I said, we're actively, let's see. I got a direct message, but I want to send it to everybody. There we go. Yeah, I'll put my, this is not my uni address. This is my personal Gmail, which I think is better because when I'm on leave, that's the one I'll probably be using more. And I'm delighted to, but I'll put my uni one in too, so you have that too. But I'd love to start scheming about all this now. I'm really excited about the dome. I didn't show a picture of it today, but I'll have pictures from our event on April 9th that I can share. I'm thinking we can do cyanotypes in New Zealand with all the beautiful ferns. All the beautiful flora there are really well suited for this. So I just feel like there's a lot of really exciting opportunity for documenting some days, many days in New Zealand. I'm thinking that maybe I can take the dome out someplace and camp for a while, and people can come visit me at the dome and reflect on ecological thought. Therese and I were talking earlier before we got going about, and my heart goes out to you with the raging coronavirus aspect of life in New Zealand now. And I was telling Therese, as a Californian, where we've been through the thick of it, for some time, that I think now more than ever we really need each other to, masked probably, but sit together and really talk about how things are and how we want them to be, and be in solidarity with each other. And I mean, Fulbright, as you know, was I'm sure you all know the history of Fulbright. It was a thought put together right after World War II. And, Senator Fulbright's idea was that if people could get together and sit together and recognize and see each other, that the world had a chance. And Fulbright has just done such a marvelous organization. I mean, the support that I've gotten for my work through this organization is amazing. And I'm thrilled to be heading back to, fly the flag again.
And also, just to add to that, Leslie, one of the other things that I thought of was exactly that, the fact that you know, so the heart of this program is exactly that sort of people-to-people connection. And it's really interesting to me that, you know, when this program started post-World War II, it was to address all of those massive chasms, to address the disunity and the atrocities of the war, you know. And now with what's happening in the Ukraine and what's happening all around the world in terms of just, we know about climate change, we know what's going on. It's this incredibly fraught, was often very terrifying kind of thing, and yet the power of those people-to-people connections is extraordinary to me, you know. And that I know it's sort of at times when I feel overwhelmed, I think, you know, what does that matter? It's, you know, it's a drop in the ocean, but it's really not, you know. And I see it all the time. I mean, just even talking with you today, you know, you've got all of these connections that you've still maintained in New Zealand, you know, 20 years after your award, you know, and the fact that you're happy to be here and all of these wonderful things. And it's so relevant to the work that you're doing in ECOPOESIS, but yeah, but also there's a really big conversation, you know. There's a lot going on, and I'm really, really pleased that we have, as a, you know, not many organizations have as their kind of mission statement, this people-to-people connection. It's pretty cool, you know.
Right.
Really
And
cool.
the solidarity that we all feel together. And, you know, quite frankly, I would not have founded the ECOPOESIS project if I had not been a Fulbright Fellow in New Zealand, and I hadn't met my dead boyfriend, Frank Arthur Worsley, and I hadn't worked with the historian Baden Norris or the curator Carrie McCarthy, or the many people in my Fulbright class who were doing many of them were marine biologists, but they were doing very exciting work. We took a hair-raising canoe trip on the Whanganui River after a huge deluge. It was actually very dangerous, and I had my little kids with me, but it taught me a lot about survival and good cheer. But yeah, no, Trez, I completely hear you on that. I think, yeah, those are all really well, you know, well said points. I see we've got a question from Robert Collar, who's saying the modern ecology movement in the US probably dates back to the 60s or 70s. Have you compared your project to the efforts of those earlier pioneers? And what do you think they might say about the times we live in today, given what they started? Oh boy, that's a good one, Robert Collar. That's a complex question. So yeah, absolutely. We think about the particularly being in California, there were a lot of communes in California. There was a lot of vernacular architecture. There were a lot of efforts to, you know, the whole, you know, so-called hippie movement of the 1960s here in San Francisco, which spawned this, you know, drop out, move out into the wild kind of thing. And we absolutely have thought about those projects and those movements, even though I think to a one, they all sort of fell apart for various reasons. They're still fascinating to look at. We also look at Black Mountain College in North Carolina and think about what was going on there with Joseph Albers coming over from Dessau, and you know, people fleeing the Nazis and then starting this kind of crazy art school in the mountains of North Carolina. It gives us a lot of like fuel for our conversations, what they were doing there. And what do I think they might say about the times we live in today? I think they would be horrified. I think a lot of people who were imagining that everything was going to continue to be that we were moving into a time of increased, you know, awareness of things. I mean, remember though too, like in the 70s, that was, you know, the whole, you know, we're all going to die in a catastrophic nuclear war was not far from people's minds. Like the 70s were not like a cheerful decade, particularly, you know, in the United States. I mean, I can't speak for the rest of the world. So yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question. I mean, I'd be curious to see what other people think. I mean, what would people from 50 years ago think about the times we're in now? I think they'd be startled in a lot of ways that we've squandered. and again, we're not guilty of anything, but that we've had so many opportunities to get things right, and we've struggled, right, in a lot of ways. But there's hope. I know, Robert, what do you think?
I am not sure. You know, I live in California, born and raised, and I'm familiar with the Salton Sea and the lithium mining that you referred to. In fact, there's lithium mining going on in the Taupo volcanic zone, North Island of New Zealand, through the geothermal waters and geothermal systems. Yeah, I threw that out there because I didn't have an answer to that question, and I haven't really thought about it, but your presentation, you know, got me thinking about it. And I've enjoyed your presentation, and I am really focused on this active hope. I like that. So thank you for planting that seed.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I also thank you, Robert. I mean, I appreciate the question. And I also wanted to note that this notion of active hope, there's a professor at, I think, Texas Tech, I think it is, Catherine Hayhoe, Hayhoe, has a beautiful book about climate change out now, about active hope and thinking about that. So there are a lot of people trying to move into that space. I think many of us are very tired or despairing of the sage on the stage apocalyptic vision people who have gotten a lot of attention over the years because they're, you know, that gloomy sort of view that things are bad and they're only going to get worse. I don't agree with that. As you know, as Opie said, don't bet against humans. I don't think we're ready to give up. I don't think we're ready to give up without a fight. I think that, you know, while there are compounding complications in the world today between the Ukraine and COVID, that what we're seeing come out of that, what we're actually seeing come out of this, there's a lot of very beautiful moments coming out of this. And we need to look at those and not be caught up in pessimism and cynicism, which is no way forward. And I see that Paul says, Kia ora, Paul. Thanks for coming out today. Did you have a question?
I think I'm just looking at the time, Lizzie, and I'm just thinking if there are no more questions or comments, or if there's nothing that anyone else wants to pipe up with, that we might think about wrapping up.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So I think everyone has gone a bit quiet, so I think we can take that as a sign. And yeah, I just wanted to reiterate again that it's been really, really great hearing from you, and really great to see this extraordinary creative work that's happening and that you're kind of fostering with this ECOPOESIS group, and it's really, really exciting. And also, I think that there's going to be an awful lot of stuff. I think you're going to be very, very busy when you get to Aotearoa, because I think you will find many people, myself and some of the team here at Fulbright also included, will be very excited to see what you're doing, chip in with any potential ideas, etc. You know,
that would be great.
Yeah, and you know, Wellington's a really great creative community, so I think you'll feel more than at home here. All right, so I will just close us off now and just say thanks once again for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.